Right. So to start off, we just stand in the posture that we use for many of the exercises. So feet hip width apart to give maximum support for your hips. Let your weight just come a little bit forwards here so that you feel more of your weight in the front half of your feet. And really the focal point ideally would be just behind the ball of your foot. Or the other way of thinking of it is 70% of your weight in the front of your feet. And to kind of counter that slight feeling of being drawn forwards, and I'm going to come closer, I'm going to exaggerate this. Just let your hips drop back. This is more than I would expect to do at this point. It's just a settling down, a sitting into our hips. This has the effect of dropping your center of gravity down, giving you a more stable posture. And also, because your hips have dropped down, but you've got this slight sense of a lift through the back of your head, that comes from your chin pulling in and lengthening in your back. And one of the things that really interests me about this posture is that it combines a sense of settledness and stillness, just being able to stand with an upright position that isn't strained, but also if I would just go here, just a slight movement forwards, and I will automatically take a step. So although it's a very settled posture, you've got almost enough energy to take a step. So it's an interesting combination, and I suppose in many ways it's very typical of Tai Chi. This idea of seeking the stillness within the movement. See, I've got a hair hanging down. But this idea, seeking the stillness within the movement, is kind of encapsulated in this one posture. We want to try and work with both. So bring your attention to the center of your body here between hips and waist, and just start to turn them. What will happen is your arms will start to move. You may find there's a bit of movement like this in your legs, and we want to try and just remove that gently. But one way or another, we begin to recognize that the central part of the body effectively touches all areas of the body. It's this central part that we sit with, and so we drop our center of gravity, and when we turn there, as you notice, we move in the upper part of the body, and we move in the legs as well. But this central part of the body, one of the descriptions of it that I think works really well is that it's like the hub of a wheel. And if you've got a bike or a car or anything with wheels, really, the wheel is locked into the frame. So the hub of the wheel is still, and it's the stillness of the hub that enables the movement. If you've got a bicycle and the wheel is loose, you'll move a little bit, but you won't get very far. Eventually the movement will cut, your bike will collapse or something like that. So we need that quality of stillness. And like all processes in Tai Chi, it's a body-mind process. We can locate, if you like, the hub. The other way of thinking of that stillness would be that your feet are still, but that isn't necessarily the case. If we're doing stepping or something like that, obviously one foot is going to be in motion. Doesn't really matter from the point of view of our attention and the focus of our attention. It could be any part of the body, but from the point of view of Tai Chi and posture and the movements we make, certainly feet or center, or maybe just that whole area from hips down to your feet, becomes a really important focus that eventually just becomes a natural part of how we move. So your attention may drift away, but after a while you'll notice that, and you just bring it back. So at the heart of the movement, there's a quiet, calm quality that enables us to observe what's going on in our body. It's not the only aspect of mind that we cultivate in Tai Chi by any means. We want an awareness of what's going on in the other parts of the body. We bring an intent to the body, to guide the body. But it's hard to do that if your thoughts are racing. So a kind of primary task, really, and this is where I know working with posture can be really helpful. That primary task is to just slow down our thoughts, not to stop thinking, not to kind of like block our thoughts or anything like that, but just to put the brakes on by returning our attention to our body. So the kind of quest for perfect posture in Tai Chi is an ongoing one, and probably in the end, one that is unachievable. There's probably no such thing as perfect posture. But when we try to improve our posture, when we notice things about our posture, there's a redirection of our thoughts from out there with all the things in our lives that we're dealing with, and they're not necessarily bad things at all, to something a little bit more stable within the body. The very idea of a stillness within the movement suggests that both are important, but we tend to underemphasize the stillness in our lives. So we begin to just cultivate that. And we know through modern neuroscience that how we think is reflected in patterns of neural pathways and neural cells within the brain. So tests have been done on people who say, for instance, they think about compassion and those kind of qualities, the parts of the brain that are activated by those thoughts can sometimes grow and become more dominant. So over a period of time, through that simple process of paying attention to our posture, we develop this capacity to have that sense of stillness and calmness within the movement. And I think this is a really important outcome from Tai Chi practice. It encompasses mind and body, well, mind, body, and energy, really. So this is not about mind over matter. It's more about when those three elements become one. Raising your arms. So we want to be as clear and as precise as possible about our postures and our movements, partly because we want to get them right, and the more correct our postures are, the more correct our hand positions are, the better the exercise will go. I suppose that's obvious, really. But also because the effort that we make to do that helps to cultivate this quieter, calmer quality. And just let your hands drop down. Put one foot forwards, keep the width of your step, move your weight forwards and backwards, and let your body just follow that movement with the turning. Doesn't really matter at this point which way you're turning. that quality of stillness is, I suppose, elusive. It comes and it goes very easily, but we can develop an awareness of certain key points where we can get back, sort of like landmarks or signposts. And a good one is to register the arrival of your weight in each leg. As you'll see later, there are many movements that we do that are dependent on that transfer of the weight. But at the moment, what we're doing is just using the idea that the weight is transferred as an extra kind of focus, an extra anchor for our thoughts. And then on the other side, and shake out. So try not to have this sense that you're trying to stop thinking, or that we're always going to maintain this sense of calmness and stillness. And there may be some people somewhere who can do that, but most of us, it kind of varies. So this image of our thoughts being anchored is quite an interesting one. A boat that's anchored to the seabed doesn't stop moving. It drifts around, but it doesn't drift too far. So it goes in one direction and then it will get pulled back in the other direction, and so on and so forth, rather than being blown around onto the rocks or whatever. Sometimes people have said, oh, they can't stop thinking. We're not trying to stop thinking. As I said, it's just a slowing down, a settling. Another image that is used for this process is if you get a jar of muddy water or something like that and you put it on the table, just leave it there, eventually the mud will settle. But if you keep moving it around, then it won't. And so when we stand, that's like putting the jar on the table and our thoughts settle a little bit, and as we get that sense of something a bit clearer, once again we come back to a greater sense of our posture. So this is something that underlies all of the movements. Now, let your hips drop back just a little bit more and push up. And sinking down. And pushing up. So as you sink down, you feel a little stronger in the legs, and eventually your legs push you up. Because your hips are going back, you want to just allow your pelvis to tuck under. And then bring your hands around as though you're cradling the ball, and use that upward movement to push your hands up, turn over and sink down. So as I said before, we want to get the movements as precise as possible, partly in the interest of doing the movement correctly and getting more out of the movement, and partly because the effort that we make to do that, again, becomes a way of anchoring our attention. So if I come a bit closer, you see my hands are quite close to my body here. Sometimes we find ourselves with our arms out there, but for this first exercise, they stay really close to the body. And the image would be that we are lifting the ball up, and then here we're pressing the ball down into water. We use a great deal of imagery, of course, in Tai Chi to focus our intent into what are quite often quite strong movement. So if you think about this idea of pushing the ball down into water, if you were in a swimming pool and you had a ball down and you wanted to push it into the water, you sort of drop your whole body onto it. And in the same way, it's not just my arms, my hips go down, my shoulders go down, my arms follow. And the same same sort of process of movement coming up. So your arms are moved through the energy generated in the sinking and pushing up through your hips and legs. And in its turn, that process is an outcome of two things. One is the pull of gravity working through your body that you yield to. You allow your hips to drop rather than fighting against it. And from that, as your legs absorb the weight of your body, eventually they'll get to a point where, like water itself, they push you back up. And again, this cycle of movement of energy will be a constant through all of the movements. In a sense, it's a constant all our lives. Gravity is always pulling us down, and unless we've actually collapsed, there's always going to be some kind of response upwards from the body. So we're just really trying to connect in to a very natural, lifelong process and to work to cultivate it, to cease to strain against the pull of gravity, so that we're able to initiate the movement. And you know, as we know later in some of the exercises, there isn't the same active up and down movement in our hips as we get in this first 3 or 4 exercises. But yet it doesn't mean that gravity suddenly stopped at that point. This time, turn your hands out. And this is the wild goose. This time, the image of the bird in flight may convey a quality of smoothness of movement, of grace, even strength of movement. Not all of the imagery is going to work for you. Where an image is useful, do make use of it. Where it doesn't mean much, that's fine. It may come to mean something later, but if it doesn't, so be it. There's plenty of other images around. Notice where my arms are going. Here, about shoulder height, my elbows drop down. They come down to here, and then fingers drop down, but my elbows are already pushing out. So for this particular exercise, the hands don't come all the way down here. They come to about a point about level with your hips. This time, though, we let the hands drop a bit further. They cross in front of the belly, and as you push up, they're pushed up, your elbows go out, drawing your fingers around in a circle and sinking down. Try not to think of your hands moving. I know they are, but rather think of them being moved. So with this one, if I was trying to paint a circle on the wall behind me there, well, in front of me now, and my fingers were like the paintbrush, I would be moving the paintbrush, not the other way around. In other words, this movement of expansion and contraction in your body is what's moving your arms. And if you think about it, your arm is attached at one end, but not at the other. So the circles are a very natural movement. This is part in the clouds. this nice smooth sense of expansion, like the sun coming out from behind a bank of clouds, followed by the contraction, of course. One more of these. And then your arms hang down, so the weight of your arms hanging down, and the next push up on one side. Draw your fingers up, drop your elbow down, rotate as though you're plucking an apple off a tree, and pull down. This is dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Let your attention go to the other side, and as you push up, same idea, rotate. The rotation comes all the way through shoulder and chest, and pull down. Notice that there's a space between each side. There's often a temptation to get to about here and to start the next movement, but let your hips settle, let your attention move from one side of your body to another, like a camera panning across a landscape. And just try and get a sense for your hand moving to a comfortable position, not too high and not with the elbow fully locked out. Hand should be slightly in front of your body. Notice whether you're kind of pulling your hand behind, which is not uncommon for some reason. Do one more on each side. Now, bring your hands to your hips and then slightly around, lift them up like we did before. And this time, your hips just stay back. So we want to feel the movement within the body, but we're not going up and down. Hands go a little bit above your head this time, going in front of your body, and then coming back down, and then lifting and pushing out to the side. Don't do the turn yet. So because our hands are staying slightly in front of the body, our back has a sort of longer, broader feeling than the front of the body. And just notice the contrast between these two movements. When we push out sideways, it's almost like somebody massaging your back from the middle to the edges and back. When you push up, same idea, but it's along the length of your back. So each individual hand pattern, when we do it with this sense of connection in the body, when we're not tense, when we're not stiff, will have echoes, reflections of that movement within our body in one way or another. They also share many common properties, of course, to different exercises. I'm going to come forwards just slightly. And this time, as you push out sideways, turn in your hips as you did earlier, redirect your arms and coming back. Bring your hand back to the center. Turn the other way. So I said earlier about this idea that we don't maintain these qualities all the time. What we do is we return to them on a regular basis. This is the boat being pulled back towards the anchor point. And we can see that reflected in this particular movement. If the center of the body is our anchor point, our hands actually come all the way back to that central point before they push out again. in terms of Chinese sort of understanding, this rhythm in the movement from expansion to contraction will be labeled as yin yang, yang being the expanding movements, yin being the contracting movements, and both are regarded as equally important, which you do depend on which part of the exercise that you're in. But what we're looking is for a balance, a harmony between the two. And we tend to overemphasize the yang aspects. So to balance that out, there's a bit of an emphasis on the drawing in. And changing again, your hands drop down, and this time pushing one hand out to the side, let it swing up again just a little above your head, expanding through that side of the body, and then contracting. Once again, yang the expansion, yin the contraction. And they, in Chinese sort of philosophy, I suppose you'd call it, what they say is that yang leads to yin, yin leads to yang, one way or another. And so we're fitting in with that cycle, just as when we sunk down in our hips, that led to the push up. So what goes up must come down, I suppose you could say. Now this time, if it's comfortable, just turn a little bit. And again, that idea of the harmony between yin and yang is reflected in all of the movements, one way or another. Yin yang, really kind of abstract terms. They cover a range of things: expansion, contraction, opening, closing, up and down, day and night, whatever. Now change sides. And gently add in a tone if it's comfortable. One more time. Now just let your arms hang by your side and go back to this movement, sinking down and pushing up. And when I say up, don't lock your knees completely back. Up still has this sense of the hips sinking down. You're going to come a bit closer. So as I do this, if I'm putting my belly in or I'm tight in my lower back, say, and my pelvis can't move, I get pulled over very quickly. This is a very natural thing. Our hips and the pelvis really tucks under. You don't have to make that happen. If you try and do it, you'll probably do it too much. But it's quite natural. When we go to sit in a chair, we don't have to think, I need to tuck the pelvis under. Mostly it'll happen quite naturally. And so our pelvis remains level. And if our pelvis is level, then it's more likely that our shoulders are going to be upright and we maintain this aligned posture, nicely in line with the pull of gravity. And when we're in line with the pull of gravity, we're much less likely to strain against it, to yield to it, to allow it to move through our body. But we're going to change that now for the next two exercises. So be careful with your knees and your back. As I sink down, I push my hips back. Notice how my upper body tilts. I get to this position. This is a little bit exaggerated, so be careful. I let my hips drop down, and as my hips drop down, my head comes up. And push up. I think this is a really lovely aspect of the Tai Chi posture, that rather than straining to pull my head up, I actually let my hips drop down and it feels like my head floats up. So one of the characteristics of the posture for me is this very open, soft, spacious quality in the upper part of our body, which is an outcome of coming upright without straining in shoulders or back, chest, which is often what we do. If I'm trying to strain to come upright, then everything tightens up. We do two exercises using this idea. First is rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Just see how far your hands are projected forwards by this movement. Let them drop down, let your hips drop back. Then overextend your arms. It isn't the case that the bigger movements are more desirable in Tai Chi. Your arms extend out, they grow out of your shoulders. Think of a branch growing out from the trunk of a tree. It's not the leaves that go first, it moves out very smoothly. And then using the same idea, but add in an extra turn, hands in front of your belly, you turn horizontally, push your hips back, and that pushes the hands forwards. You turn, and you come back to the upright position here. And you change direction, do the same thing. So your hands are pulled around in a circle. It's called polishing the table. Do one more. And then just come back to standing in this posture. Weight forwards, hips dropping back, soften your knees. Just see how it feels at this point. Shake out. So sometimes when we do that, we may notice a difference in how it feels, not always. And that might be because you've just been doing these exercises for half an hour now, and obviously that's going to bring about changes in the body. Or it might be because your attention has become more focused within your body. More likely a combination of the two, I think. Let's change the posture. So keep the width of your step, and let's see, turn your left foot out, so mirror my movements, and step forwards with your right foot. And when I do this, I'm going to just demonstrate something here. If I, oops, I can get this lined up properly. And then let me just, yeah, there you go. So if I stand like this and my foot is against the pole, I've got the hip width here. When I take the step forwards, it goes back to there, not here. If I'm here, it's almost like I'm trying to balance on the pole, and I'm just going to tense up. Whereas this gives me a much more stable posture. The length of the step is about the same as the width, so it becomes quite a comfortable stance. And once again, in this stance, begin to transfer your weight forwards and backwards. When we go into the front leg, you get about 60% of your weight in the front leg. When you go into the back leg, it's more like 70. But it's not a huge movement at this point. And what we're trying to do is to maintain the alignment of our body. What we often do when we go to move is we move the shoulders first. But again, if I get the pole, if you imagine this pole was going up through the middle of my body like the center line, you can see it stays in line. I don't do this or this. And again, I sometimes think of that imaginary center line, but not this time, not an anchor, but a mooring post for a boat. And again, the boat will move away from that, but we come back to it. So we know that we're not going to maintain perfect alignment the whole time. And in any case, if you were walking down the road and you were walking down a hill, it would be slightly different. But we get used to the feeling of the alignment, the qualities of it in our body. And after a while, as we practice this, we begin to notice when we come out of line, and we learn how to come back into line. So this is where what we do in the exercises kind of feeds into our daily lives in one way or another. Raising your toes and your heel. So as you do this, again, trying not to lean, more and more of your weight settles in each leg. So 70 becomes 80, becomes 90, and so on and so forth. Again, trying not to lean. And then eventually, hardly any weight left at all in the other leg, and we can bring the foot in and step out. I will have my toes slightly turned out, my front toes slightly turned out here. Bring my back foot in, and we plant the foot. And when you plant something, you take care, you think about where you want to put it. Maybe dig a hole. You don't really do that. You place the foot, you place the bulb or the seedling down, and you very gently press it down into the ground. So when we're stable on one leg, we're able to plant the foot and to really feel that sense of connection to the ground. And then on the other side, when you move your weight again, give yourself a chance on each foot just to feel that sense of settling, that rooting down, checking your posture. Sometimes, quite often really, we find that we've moved across and maybe we've tilted over. And we've just got time to settle. it's unrealistic to expect to stay in perfect posture the whole time. Maybe there are people who can do it. I'm certainly not one of them. And in any case, I think it's really quite valuable to learn that we can go out of line a little bit and come back. It's not the end of the world when that happens. Again, raising your toes and your heel. A lot of what we do in Tai Chi goes against our habitual patterns, the habits that we've absorbed over our lives. So don't be surprised if you fall back into holding yourself up or something like that. Once again, in my experience, it happens with everybody. Bring your foot in. And then step through. Walking down those parallel lines, tram lines, change direction. When you get a little wobble, rather than thinking that you somehow failed, see it as an opportunity to sort of, oh, can you come back? Can you come back to that alignment? Probably more useful than maintaining what we think is perfect posture the whole time. Shake out. Have your right foot forwards in this stance. So we want to maintain those principles while we bring our arms back into the movement. Easier said than done, because our arms tend to dominate the movement. Place your hands on your belly, sink your weight into your back foot, push forwards and let the movement push your hands forwards. They'll just gently come up and out. It's called pigeon spreads its wings. And then going back and push forward and out. Just feel what's happening in your chest and in your upper back. So once again, really with all the movements, but particularly big movements like this with the arms, invoke a pattern within the body. And part of the development in Tai Chi for all of us is to begin to focus more on those internal patterns, to focus our intent here. So your intent is for your chest to expand, and that moves your arms in the end. So to start off with, if it's a movement we haven't recognized, it's the other way around. We do the external movement and begin to recognize the internal pattern. But it's those internal movements that are more likely to be affected by our intent, by our minds in one way or another. And the more we can do that, the more fluid and the softer the external movements become. Do one more of these. And shake out. Don't think of this as mind over matter. When we use intent, we're not forcing our body to do something unnatural or painful or anything like that. We've got, it's an idea. It's almost like a suggestion, you could call it. Why not expand in the chest? I know, perhaps taken a bit too far. What we're looking for, as I say, is not the mind dominating the body. It's never as simple as saying, think the right thoughts and everything will be fine, but rather the potential that we have when these three different elements of body, mind, and energy, or if you prefer to use movement instead of energy, that's fine, blend into one thing. It's almost like a process of cooking. The different sort of light parts of the dish soften and merge, and we get not sort of carrots over here and onions over there, but rather the combination of flavors. So have your right foot forwards and sink back, and pigeon spreads its wings. And these three elements will reinforce and support each other. I sometimes think of them as being like three legs of a tripod that you might put a telescope or a camera on. You need all three legs for it to work. The pigeon spreads its wings. And shake out. So in order to be able to apply our intent to those internal movements, those internal patterns, we need to be aware of them. And that brings us back to this idea of the stillness within the movement. It's hard to be aware of something when you're dashing around. Now, have your right foot forwards again. This time, hands down by your sides. Go forwards, drawing your arms through. This is fisherman castanet. Your arms swinging from your shoulders, following your shoulders for the most part. The shoulders following your hips. Like a wave flowing through your body from the back foot, through your body and down into the front foot, and then from the front to the back. So with this movement and this posture, you're moving forwards and backwards. You're facing forwards. Don't worry if you've got a slight angle there, it doesn't matter at this point. And your arms are swinging forwards and backwards. It's a fairly straightforward formula. So the movement in your back and your shoulders, chest and your belly and your sides. This time, as you go back, turn a little bit in the direction of your back foot. Other than that, it's the same exercise. So now, simply by turning, it hasn't really changed in our arms. They're still following our shoulders. But again, we've got that sense of the center of the body directing our arms. And there's an arc there. There's a bit of a circle there. And this time, just let your hands continue through that arc. Maybe aware that feel the expansion in the side of your body, and then down as you bring your weight forwards. Turn a little bit, expanding that side of your body, and down. As you become more familiar with the movement, so you think of that expansion in the side, for instance, when you know how it feels in one of the earlier exercises, like dragon plucks the stars from the sky, you begin to see there's a very similar quality there. And what we end up with is our arms being drawn through a figure of eight movement. Remember, if you were painting the figure of eight on a wall, your body would be moving the paintbrush, not the other way around. And your fingers, your hands are like the paintbrush. Good, and then just shake out. So we emphasize that in Tai Chi because we're evolutionarily hardwired to move more with our arms and our hands. And there's probably an increasing tendency in the lives that we live today. But in Tai Chi, we say that the movement is rooted in the feet. This is the center of gravity, sinking, and the stability and so on that comes with that. Transmitted through the legs. We sink down and we get pushed up. We move into one leg and we get pushed back into the other leg. Controlled or directed by the center of the body. We're just seeing how that works, and expressed in the arms. So rather than with that last exercise, kind of go, oh, I'm going to do this with my hands, there's a still quality about the arms. I move my weight back, I turn, my hands naturally drop down. I turn, they swing up, and so on and so forth. So have your left foot forward, and starting with fisherman cast the net, which here again, the hands swing down and up. I don't have to make them do that because they're attached at one end and not at the other. If I had a conker on a piece of string and I just did this, it would swing in the same pattern as my arms. The fisherman cast the net. So our hands develop a quiet quality as they move. And this leads to a very sustainable flow. If we try and do this a lot, then eventually your arms get tired and you'll stop moving. So the flow, the movement, the energy is very dependent on structure and posture, awareness. And again, we have these three elements supporting each other in one way or another. So this time turning. As you become more used to these, there is still that areas of the body that are expanding, areas of the body that are contracting. And as you come back this time, those areas that begin to expand, we encourage that through our intent, and the arms begin to move a little bit further. Same thing on this side. Oops, my hands disappearing. Don't let your hands go too far away from your shoulders or too high. They'll be more likely to produce a kind of quality of stiffness. Now this time, I'm going to tell my front protector I'm going to go forwards, but go whichever direction suits you. Go forwards, bring the hands down. As you turn, raise your back heel, bring your foot in, step forwards. Move the weight. Again, check your posture, have a sense of the alignment of your hips and your pelvis. And if all is well with that, and you feel comfortable with this, you can just raise your knee. Oops, didn't quite manage it that time. I'm going to change direction, otherwise I'm just going to run completely out of space. And bring your feet down. And then shake out. Lovely. Rub your hands together. And then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. On the other side. Onto your back, so just the lower part of your back. And around your hips. And your legs. Then light on your belly. Finally, the upper part of your chest. So just a reminder, there will be no Zoom class on Monday, but this recording will go up sometime over the weekend or on Monday. It's just a one-off because of something extra that I'm doing. So just coming back to standing and this idea of returning. This is the last exercise is called Embrace Tiger, Return to Mountain. We sink down and we push up. Bit like the wild goose. Bring your hands around as though you're going to hold the ball against your chest. Drop your elbows so the hands come in and then press down. I think of the tiger as just being everyday life, whatever aspect of it, and just the fact that we regularly, if you like, get thrown off center. But again, I think this one of the ideas in Tai Chi that is really important is that we have a way back. So it's worth thinking about this. What is it that encourages you to come back to that settled feeling for a moment or two? There's something useful to take away with you, whether it be something physical or maybe the image of the mountain or something I've said in some other class or something you've experienced yourself. One more. And rest. Shake out. Thank you very much for coming along, everybody. And hopefully